So welcome everyone who's already joined us. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I'm Amanda, I'm the editorial director of PTEN, and I'm going to be hosting the webinar today. So as you know, this webinar is about the aftermarket profile. So that is a comprehensive snapshot of the automotive aftermarket that provides insight from PTEN readers on tool and equipment purchases they've made recently or plan to make soon. For years, our readers have turned to these survey results to discover what's trending among their peers and within the industry as a whole. So joining me today to discuss the results of this year's survey is Michelle Tansey, owner and CEO of Dubclinic, Keith Perkins, owner of L1 Automotive Diagnostics, and Brian Plott, executive director of the Equipment and Tool Institute. Thank you all for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So before we jump in here, I do want to explain a little bit. There was a lot of data that was in the aftermarket profile. There's a ton of stuff we could have talked about. So we sort of tried to go through and pick and choose some data points that we thought were interesting and might spark a little bit of conversation. So the first one we're going to discuss is the finding that 35% of survey respondents said reprogramming and reflashing is a top service opportunity. And we're seeing this increasing every single year that we do the survey. So I'm wondering, why this is, and most importantly, how can shops make the most of this opportunity? And Michelle, I think we'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, of course. I think we started seeing more and more an increase in it just because vehicles require updating as manufacturers come up with solutions for vehicle issues, such as software updates, calibrations, sensor range and sensibility. And for our shop, and I'm sure Keith can agree with this, having proper equipment in-house to allow us to keep all repairs, quality checks, and being able to scan these vehicles, keeping it in-house is probably the most important thing. So finding proper equipment to do that is hard. We do majority like VAG makes, so Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche. I have to buy factory scanners to be able to allow me to do that to the best of my ability. Program cars, program cameras, program windshields, all these sensors that require us to keep stuff in-house, or I have to sublet this out to the dealership. So buying the proper equipment is probably the best way that a shop will take advantage of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Keith, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah. So I completely agree with everything with one change. Considering I run a company that sublets out, there are options for mobile providers for that. But just like with any other aftermarket solution, there are good and there are bad. So keeping it in-house as much as possible is the best thing you can do to create processes for these things. And we talked about this a little bit before, that it can be very difficult to create a process in-house to have a repeatable routine so things aren't missed. And it has a lot to do with having a capable factory level scan tool, preferably OEM, and then service information is massively key. Having your technicians well versed in understanding and navigating service information is a skill that they will have to develop, and it's absolutely critical to working on today's vehicles.
Yeah, and I agree with Keith. I mean, investing in technicians training to even know how to use these scan tools as well, just so we don't have, like we were discussing before, miss of opportunity of what they could have. I mean, they can all plug it in with a VACOM or something. You don't need a factory one to do so, but factory scanners do provide specific procedures for those diagnostic protocols per make.
Mm-hmm. Brian, do you have any thoughts you wanted to add on the reprogram reflashing opportunities?
I kind of look at it, the industry itself right now is in a state of evolution. We were talking about the issues and the concerns here before the call started, and some of those things are opportunity, and some of them are we have to figure it out to turn it into an opportunity. But we were talking about the scan tools, and that's something that every couple of years now, it's Keith, you were mentioning that it's a growing issue to stay out in front of it and stay on top of it, especially as you're focusing your business and involving your business. You talked about mobile a mobile service operation that you're doing and dedicated facility for ADAS. These are all things that are new in the recent past and keep moving and evolving to the stuff going forward. So it's very important for the shop owners to have those visions and those targets on where they're going with their business, to be able to keep those things under control and profitable for the business.
I think the second half of that question of why is this and how can shops make the most out of this has a lot to do with the manufacturers. You can't put a window switch in a Chevy truck without programming it now. It is a module. The reason for modules is because we have tons of functions of one side of the vehicle to the other that need to happen, and rather than running dedicated power ground activation wires from one module all the way to the other car to run a thing, we'll just make that component a module and run just a communication line to it, and then internally it can do those functions. So it's for reducing waste and reducing weight in the vehicle. Everything's about a CAFE credit, everything's about how many dollars can we save per manufactured vehicle, and then make it safer at the same time, right? So as we see this progress, you're going to see more and more and more components require some kind of scan tool activation, initialization, coding, programming. Insert the term here. So it will be necessary. I suspect within the next 10 years that a shop won't be able to do day-to-day operations without some kind of factory level tool. And there are not many aftermarket tools that will process programming, because these software that, and there's a huge difference. I don't want to get into the crazy difference between coding, programming, initializing, startup, teach-in. All those terms are all different and somewhat similar. And most manufacturers store their programming software on their own servers. So you're going to have a factory subscription and factory access tool. Now with J2534 and right to repair, the hardware is most likely going to be able to have one inexpensive hardware component to do those, but each manufacturer requires a subscription. So you're going to have to get well versed in how that individual manufacturer operates its software. And again, that's just a skill you have to learn and have to foster and send text to training to understand those things.
Right.
Well said.
Great. So this actually kind of goes well into ADAS. I know it came up a couple times here. So one finding from the survey was, slowly more shops are offering ADAS services. It's definitely not exploding in percentage. It was 6% in 2020, and then it was 11%, in the survey that we did at the end of last year. So I'm wondering, Keith, I'll start with you. What's your reaction to those slowly creeping up numbers? And again, what can shops do, if they're interested in taking this on, and what investments should they make?
So I think that number is representative of just individuals that are recognizing that those calibrations can be done in-house.
Okay.
I want to say the very first vehicle I can remember back and working on was probably a 2010, like a Hyundai Equus, and it had a lane departure camera. I think Cadillac had some back then as well. There's probably many other manufacturers that had advanced driver assistance systems of what we know today. Realistically, in the early 90s, for adaptive cruise control, Mitsubishi had I can't remember exactly what they called it, but in the Japanese domestic market, the 3000 GT actually had adaptive cruise control using LiDAR in 91, 92. But in what we notice today and what we call today ADAS is we're seeing in about 2012 and up a lot of vehicles adapting that. So why haven't we seen this in the aftermarket if we're working on these? And the reality is, I think that the majority of these systems operate on the vehicle being calibrated to its spatial awareness, that component being calibrated to its spatial awareness in the universe of the car driving. So when that's moved or changed or something affects that, it doesn't know. So there's no light and there's no code. So it's heavily reliant on if the calibration needs to be done based on what services were provided. A good example to kind of hopefully bring that into perspective for a technician is if you do a radiator replacement on a late model Toyota Corolla, Camry, whatever, the radar bracket is typically attached to that radiator support bracket in the front of the vehicle. So a simple radiator replacement would then, according to OE service information, require a front radar calibration. But you can remove that component, not knowing what it is, reinstall the component, and there will be no lights, no codes, and the system will still operate it won't operate correctly. It doesn't recognize, if it's off just 1 degree, it's looking slightly into a different direction. It may not recognize the direction of travel and speed of the vehicle in front of it until a much closer distance, which then, by a symptom of that, the vehicle has a less capable automatic emergency braking system. Again, there's no lights, no codes, nothing's happened, but enough technicians have replaced radiators. They don't go look at how to replace it every single time and then go to the very end and look and see what has to be done afterwards. It's the same issue we had with batteries. Battery replacement typically requires some kind of battery management reset, some kind of special function amongst different relearns, and they get missed, right? Because we know how to replace a battery as a technician. So until we adopt that thought process of every car we touch, every job we look at, we go read and understand factory service information, it is going to be a slow increase. Just the more and more shops that we see that provide that training to their technicians and create that as a part of a routine, the more we'll see it grow. But the reality is it should be a much larger number right now. Many vehicles are leaving without calibrations that need them.
And I mean, I agree with everything that Keith just said. Just in the conversation we were having prior, I was telling Keith, I don't think we've seen one that needed one so far. And he says, you know what, you probably have, but it's the missed opportunity of like not knowing that it needs it. I talked to some of our shop owners that own collision repair centers or that own windshield replacement companies, and they're the ones that kind of see it more, right? They're doing it. But I'm extremely surprised of how high, I guess, and I thought 11% in just 2022, to me, is pretty high, how dealer alternative shops are offering ADAS services because of the hefty buy-in in equipment and scanners and the slow return on investment. But yeah, I mean, in the future, we're looking already in the starts, probably by the end of the year, investing in capable scanners that will reflect signal boards and obviously technician training to know how to use this for us to not miss these opportunities.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, excuse me, Michelle, you touched on that. The investment can be quite a bit upfront. I'm wondering if anyone kind of wants to piggyback on that. Are there any experiences that you've heard, sort of maybe even just anecdotally through friends who have made that investment and maybe did see it pay off a little bit faster? And any kind of stories to kind of, if someone's thinking about it and they're kind of nervous about it, maybe encourage them to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. When we decided to add ADAS to our repertoire, now remember, we're a mobile business that works for shop to shop. So we technically service, way more customers than most shops do as the end result of that. Which is the only reason why sometimes all the factory equipment we have has an ROI, because we do service about 320 individual repair facilities and collision centers in the Tulsa area. And Tulsa houses, metropolitan-wise, a little over 1 million people that are serviced out of it. And because we're larger on the side of cities, but not big enough where public transport is a huge thing, we have a lot of vehicles here. So we decided to add that. Our initial investment was somewhere around, I want to say right at $30,000 with equipment and additional subscriptions and service info. And I can tell you that we were in the black probably 4 months in. We had already made back what the equipment was, and we were into the profit part of it. But again, we're in a unique situation where we service hundreds of repair shops and collision centers. So we're doing them daily. We're doing 5 to up to 10 calibrations a day currently. So
right. Yeah, I can see that being a bit different.
Could I interject, ask a question of you, Keith?
Yeah.
We had our annual meeting last week, and one of the presenters, they did a lengthy presentation on ADAS. One of the statistical points they pointed out or stated in there was that just short of 90% of the vehicles that are being identified that need the calibration in a normal repair shop are being sent down to either a dealer or somebody specializing in that. Does that kind of sound like viable in terms of the percentage? Or
if we're talking about vehicles that actually require it based on any service that was performed at any shop or collision center, it's nowhere near that. They're not even being identified. I would say 90% of calibrations that need to be done are not even identified as being done, let alone actually performed. But of the ones that are identified, I would say probably 90% are sublet out to a dealer or a mobile individual. Absolutely. There are very few repair shops or collision centers that are performing them in-house.
Yeah.
And it's not really, I mean, our massive investment we made in ADOS was for like picking out the 90% of what's on the road around us. We could have started small with less than a couple $1,000s of investment. Some of these targets are very inexpensive. Just off the top of my head, a couple things. For less than $300, you can have the radar target for Toyota. Similar pricing for Honda. The targets for cameras are about $450 for Honda. There's not one target for all of that make, right?
Right.
But just individual targets can be between $150 to $400 or $500, and some of them are $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for an individual target. And then some of them are dynamic, so they require no targets. You're using a scan tool to start that process. So it's not for those to kind of go, what do shops need to invest, or what do we think about to push them in that direction? It's not as expensive as you think. Go out and get training, and then make a decision business wise of what you will start with. Start small. Add an initial vehicle make type calibration you're going to do, and start with that.
Right.
Well said,
Yeah,
Brian.
If you do all brands, I would probably recommend to start with, like for us, we're huge on VAG because that's all we do. Planning expansion into more Euro brands, it's going to be a hefty price tag for us to get the proper equipment, right? But I'm not going to go out and buy the Porsche scanner if I'm only doing like 3 a month, you know? You kind of have to do your research, and we started with VACCOM. That's what we were doing at first before we invested in this big VW Audi scanner and paying the yearly subscriptions per make through Otis. It's expensive. I think our initial investment was closer to like 15,000, I want to say, and it took us a while to see that. Yeah. You know what I mean? So now that if I want to do Beamer, if I want to do Mercedes, if I want to do Porsche, that requires more investment. And imagine the hefty price tag per make, just because each make manufacturer has its own diagnostic protocol. So it's not like you can use this stuff, or it's hard to find aftermarket scanners that allow you that. You know, we've looked into Mako Maximus 4, even talking to Keith because he uses all these scanners. He's the scanner king. But they don't really do what they say they do, or then it requires an update. So now that scanner is no good. So it's $8,000. So then you look, should I buy the factory scanner that's $2,000 more and requires a subscription because it will update that subscription yearly? So yeah, it makes more sense to invest in the factory scanners.
There's so much to consider.
Yeah.
When you're expanding, the makes that you're working on, Michelle. It's a lot to consider.
Yeah, like for me, what I did, I reached out to my network of like my business coach people and whoever is doing Euro all over the nation. I'm talking to people in Georgia, talking to people in Nashville. Like, what are you guys using to do this? Since you guys work on all Euro. And I think that's the best way to consider investment. Don't go in all in, like Keith said, you have to educate yourself too and do your research, and then forecast when are we going to go, how to make this purchase, so we can actually see a return on investment.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great advice. Brian, did you have anything you wanted to add on that one before we move on?
No.
Yeah, you're good. You're good for yours.
Yep,
Okay,
I'm good
great.
with her.
So our next
satisfied my curiosity. Thank you.
Oh, good. Brian's going to start us on this next one here. So we're looking at, the equipment that shops are really investing in this year. The survey sort of touched on lots of different things, from repair information to software to digital inspection tools. But, Brian, we would love to hear your take on what investments are you seeing that shops are going to be making this year?
I love, first off, Keith mentioning that go get yourself some training and then go decide what you're going to do with your business. There's the statistics and everything that you've got in the report really speak volumes. If anybody looks at anything relative to a scanner, you can see where the focus is, and largely that's where the focus has been with our conversation here. So I think that's going to continue, because a lot of the things that the aftermarket's having to address is scan tool and service and repair information related. Those are the kings right now. You know, we look at anybody having any issues getting employees or hiring employees. That's an easy question.
I don't know, maybe haven't heard about
Yeah.
that.
And then, okay,
No
let's go one
problem.
better. Or anyone having any issues getting trained technicians and so forth.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the training and the repair information are immensely critical, and everything's, you know, we've always looked at, or I've always been on the mechanical side, mechanical repair and diagnostics and electronics. And I've gotten pulled in by some of our members to take a look at the rest of the world, which is collision. And if you look at how that's impacting collision, there's a real eye opener there. I mean, you've got different technicians and different skill sets that have been there traditionally. Now they're seeing the new cars before we see the new cars, and having to deal with, you know, all of those things. It's not a component failure or something throwing the trouble code. Here you've got a vehicle that's been in an accident and sliced a harness in half, and you've got to be able to go back and determine, you know, is this repairable? What it's a whole raft of things that we're having to look at as an industry. And I see that, you know, I think it's great, especially the point that they made out on quality. That's still a driving factor in terms of products and tools that the aftermarket's investing in. Even the avenues that they invest in, the parts stores and the mobile jobbers and that type of thing. They know they're going to get superior professional quality when they're doing that, because they're going to be investing in a whole lot more, depending on the tack that they take their businesses. So, yeah. So, Michelle, Keith, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Brian. Like for us, even before looking at these questions, just in talking to leadership team, where are we going to invest? You know, where is majority of our budget going to go for us to become a more reliable shop that offers the quality so we can compete and be a dealer alternative shop? Majority is capable scanners, of course. We're looking at stuff like the new AC machine that offers a new Freon, the R1234, alignment machines for vehicles that require ADAS calibrations now. A lot of people don't think of that, like it's coming, it's going to happen. You have to be prepared and train the technicians, because in sense, like Keith said earlier, answering questions, everything requires a module, everything has a sensor now. And I feel like more and more the mechanic terminology has to die, and it will die, because they are real technicians. They have to train and be educated. And essentially they're reverse engineering stuff. They're not just fixing stuff. True. So in a sense, they are engineers, you know, it requires more training and education. And that's where shops have to now realize it's hard to get technicians. It's hard to get trained technicians, like Brian said. So a shop has to invest. If you're hiring and you see great character and mindset, focus on that before you do skill, because we can invest in training that skill for the stuff that's needing you. Technicians now do reverse engineering. They're essentially fixing issues that engineers designed. That's how I feel people should see it, right? So yeah, I totally agree.
Cool. That's a great way of saying that. I like how you said that. It's a good point.
One other question for the two, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, of course.
So do either of you plan, or are you already evolving your businesses to engage in doing work on EVs?
Yes. I already have seen a lot of like e-golfs, the Audi electric little crossbacks. And we had a McLaren that came in too, but we didn't have the proper equipment to do so. So we had to sublet this stuff out. I think I'm super gracious that dealerships are extremely hated in my area. But some customers want us to sublet to the dealer. They want to go through us, pay them markup for me to sublet it, because they don't want to deal with them. They want us to deal with them. So essentially we are the dealership's customer, not our customer. Wow. But yeah, it's definitely something that we have to, as alternative dealer shops in the aftermarket industry, realize that we have to invest in this type of training and equipment so we can keep all of these repairs in-house. Just like he said, imagine, I think he invested 150 grand in equipment and scanners just because of his customer base. And that's nuts. I forgot if you want to share with us, I don't know if you mentioned it when the panel started, how long it took you to kind of see a return on investment on some of this equipment. And then the training that I'm sure you didn't even talk about you had to do with your technicians.
Yeah, I have strived to create the shop that everyone wants to work at. So I'm not seeing a technician shortage. I have a line of people on the bench that are ready to
send some my way, Keith. Send some my way.
Yeah.
Every hand on the call just went up.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
I'm in a very unique situation, right? So, being the shop that every other shop calls, I'm regularly in every shop in the area. So technicians kind of notice that and then ask questions. And we do a lot of things that attract technicians. I was a technician in 2017. I was working for somebody. And November 5th, 2018, I was fired, and it's a long story, but here we are today. Right. So I took all of the things I disliked about being a flat rate technician, that was the diagnostician, that was the guy that other shops called, that other people brought their cars to, that every technician in the shop asked questions to, and I tried to change everything. So a lot of that, I had a huge investment in tool and equipment since 2018. As a technician, I was spending $12,000 a year, $10,000 a year on tools anyways. So times 10 now on what we spend yearly for tools and equipment. I don't know how much we really want to get in numbers, but we are encroaching on the $500,000 of actual tools and equipment, not lifts, not that kind of stuff. I mean, diagnostic tools and
diagnostic equipment,
oscilloscopes, scan tools, factory tools. We don't have a whole lot of timing tools or any of that kind of stuff at our shop. We do very light repair on what we do. So but the training thing is huge. My guys are required to do at least 100 hours of training that's documentable a year. We shut down the shop for one time a year for sure. Every year the entire shop shuts down for Vision. We go to Kansas City for that training event, and then we kind of rotate people between like Apex, ASTE, WorldPack, STX when it comes around, those kinds of things. So we typically try to get at least 40 or 50 hours of instructor-led, and the rest of it has to be documentable online training, whether it be self-paced e-learning or what have you, other kind of training there is. So training's huge. If you're not doing close to that, there's no way to keep up. There's absolutely no way to keep up with today's cars if you're not doing 100 hours of training a year. It's just not possible.
Or even specialized shops, you have to keep up with their training.
Yes.
Just because you don't have the luxury to see all kinds of brands and all kinds of stuff coming in. I just started during COVID becoming a service shop. I always didn't say I was a maintenance shop. A lot of the stuff that I see, I was a repair shop. I was doing everything that people did not want to do at the dealerships, water pumps, timing chain tensioner updates, stuff that the labor was so high at the dealerships that they were seeking alternative shops to do this. And I had to invest a lot in training our technicians to be able to keep up, or you won't survive. I think the reason that we survived COVID, because a lot of shops in my area that were specialty shops did not. I think it was because we had training on performance stuff, performance upgrades. In Silicon Valley, a lot of engineers weren't driving. They were working from home. They didn't need their car, so they would drop it off. Hey, I want to do all this kinds of crazy stuff. Do it. That's kind of what kept us alive. And then we retained them as a customer. Now they started coming in for maintenance. And a lot of it is training, having processes. Little mom and pop shops that don't have processes can't survive nowadays because you can't afford a technician that needs to be able to work on these cars now. It is hard. And it's not just Euro makes. I talked to a lot of my Euro network shop owners, and it's not. Toyota is getting the same way. Ford's getting the same way. Everything has a module. Everything has a sensor. It's like they have to understand this, and they have to know how to use the proper equipment. You have to train them. Us, like Keith, we close to go to Apex. We do training. We missed Kansas City because we were in a conference for our business coaching group, but we tried to send our shop foreman and our lead technician to different trainings. They go to SSF, imported auto parts training for diagnostics on certain engines. You just have to continue to invest in their training.
The technician that we need today has changed a lot.
Mhm.
10, 15 years ago, the technician that we had that was the right technician then is not, for majority of work today, is not what we need, at least in my shop, right? So we still have to have individuals that are replacing components, taking things off, putting things back on. That will
What we
always
call
be
parts
done.
changer.
Right.
Part changers.
But
Mhm.
even they need to be trained in order to understand what they're doing, what they're touching, and what the repercussions of that are. So, I mean, and what's funny when you said that about how you have customers that come to you because the dealership's charging too much, we're the exact opposite. We are actually at $50 more an hour than the most expensive dealer in our area. Just our regular walk in the door rate is, we're more expensive, and it's because I'm trying to attract the techs that are done doing those kinds of jobs and that are ready to just be the diagnostic tech or the guy that figures it out. So I've got a tech that's the highest level tech I know of in the area. I would hire, if I found anyone better, I would hire them too, and they would be a great team. But at the same time, he'll come in, he'll change a bulb or a fuse, right? He'll still do the same jobs because we have to operate a little differently, doing the 10% of what nobody else can or wants to do or is untrained or whatever. And that comes down, that literally is the end of the day, is the real difference, is my technicians understand how to read service info and follow it. And we spend the vast majority of our day in training and service information. So that investment that we make in tools that you're asking about, a lot of it is just spending time learning to be better technicians, learning how to learn better.
And it's continuous learning. It's not just like things are changing and evolving so fast. Our industry is evolving so fast that it's continuous training, and shop owners have to budget for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what about, so you talked a little bit about, just repair information kind of keeps coming up. And that was the number one thing that shops said they were investing in. And, I'm wondering, how do you know what repair information to get? Like, I know there's pros and cons for each, but do you just try to get as much as you can? Or like, how do you make that decision if you're a shop?
Kind of have to evaluate that as the shop. I've seen some shops have multiple repair information just to make sure that they've got what they need and everything jives. And those are going to be larger ones, and you've got more people utilizing it, but you've got to cross-reference if you need it.
Yeah, cross-referencing is probably one of the biggest characteristics I think they should have, and learning and asking and getting educated too. Just because maintenance, like for example, for Audis has changed in the last 2 years, and then different engines, and it could be the same engine but different part number, and this engine doesn't need this in maintenance, but spark plugs now are needed later on, and it's a disaster. I always say this is why people don't want to work on Euro vehicles. It's so hard, for us to try to have a process and to even try to do this and have can jobs already in place to be able to add and sell this faster. It's a disaster, just because different engine sizes for the same year and model might need different things. So it's a lot of information that you need to know, and paying people better than the dealer is how you get the good people, investing in them, and having proper trained technicians and staff and service writers. There's more that they need to know now to advise service. It's not just, let me just look at this little maintenance thing, or the technician said you need this. It doesn't work like that anymore. We're investing in proper shop management systems. Again, like for me, we had already invested in a digital RO writing system, just because I'm in Silicon Valley, work with engineers are my customer base, and they want information quicker. They don't want to talk to you. They just want to drop everything off. So essentially COVID wasn't like a huge hit in processes for me, but I felt a lot for like all of my other shops and friends in my network that had to do a complete swap, and everything requires a change of process. Keith was talking about this earlier, investing in ADOS and training how to use this creates a miss of opportunities because you don't have a process in place, and you got to kind of educate yourself to know when it's going to be the crucial moment where we need to implement this process. But that requires training, and that requires information.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what about the shop management software? I would like to know a little bit more again about how that is decided. I mean, I keep seeing kind of more and more solutions popping up. Do you guys have any advice for, how a shop can decide which one to go with.
Test drive it. I always say test drive it. It's a
Yeah.
pain in the butt though. And make sure make sure you know that that's the one you want to go with. Because when you transition, it's a mess. I went from ShopBoss Pro that I was with them for a long time. The technology was in there at one point, and it was a slow development. I currently have my shop on TechMetrics, and the reason I went with them, they're all similarities, they're all pretty good, was their continuous updates. And I've been with them now for a year, and they're constantly developing. They take there's a board where technicians, any staff or shop owners can make a suggestion. Why is this like this? And if people vote more for it, then the developers start changing that. And from I hear from their history, when they started, they used to be shop owners. They designed the software, and then a lot of their shop owner network had a lot to do with how they developed the software. So essentially, like, they're constantly developing stuff. And I think that's what I went with, but it was a huge disaster. So I won't consider changing unless I really, really have to.
Yeah.
It's not graceful.
Right. Keith, do you agree? Testing it out is a big part of that.
Number one thing is test it out, develop the relationship with them, find out. And the big thing that has a push for me one direction or the other is, are they willing to make those updates when there's issue? Are they on top of it? And for us, it was difficult to find something that met everything because we're running two different shop management softwares, because the mobile company has entirely different needs as a company that goes from location to location and doing these things for other professional repair shops versus the shop where we need something that's very customer driven to give easy to understand, easy to transmit data to a consumer, right? Someone who's less than knowledgeable in automotive subjects, to make it clear for them, because all we're trying to do is present facts so they can make an informed decision on what they want to do with their investment, their vehicle. On the mobile side, it's less about having a pretty DVI. It's legitimately a cover your assets situation. We need to make sure that we document properly for all repairs. That's important for the customer side too, but for the mobile side, when we're dealing with another professional repair shop, we need to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row, right? Because we're trying to assist them in repairing a vehicle for a customer. So communication is super clear on what we find versus what we did and those kinds of things. So we have two separate ones that we use. One that's not even an automotive system at all. It actually is completely driven towards the mobile environment, whether it be for HVAC technicians or electrical technicians. Is actually what it was designed for, and we're utilizing that for us because of its use of site to site. There is no good option. We're working with Shopware, which is who does our shop in-shop software, our repair information, or not repair information, but our service, our writing software, whatever you want to call it, shop management. They have a mobile version they're working on, but again, it's got to be, we're very specific in how we do things, and it is very difficult to transition. But I think initially when we were to slightly change, step back a little bit, I'll go back. I won't go too far off topic, but the repair information part of it that we were talking about before, it's all available to you. We use two independent ones that between the two do a really good job for us on the mix of vehicles we have. And again, this isn't an advertiser for anyone. I don't even know if anyone's gonna be upset if I talk about it, but we use Identifix and Modalogic both, and a mixture of those for us on the mix of vehicles we see works very well. The reality is that somewhere between 4 and probably 6 times a month, if not more, we are buying a short-term subscription to OE service information. We could in fact reach out to either one of those two providers we use that's a universal or generic service information provider, because they're just aggregating original equipment service information into one source for you. And both of those manufacturers, and everyone that I'm aware of, has an option for a library request, right? Service information that's not in their library. You can request a bit of service information, and within an hour or so, typically, they will reach out to the OE's service information site, grab that information, and produce it for you, as long as it doesn't break their service contract. For us, we typically find it's faster or more convenient to pay a short-term subscription and have the access for a period of time for us, because we're searching around, right? If we're working on a vehicle, we don't call them and go, hey, I just need this one bit of information. my technicians are approaching a problem, confirming the concern, and then going to understand the systems and how they operate and how they're designed, so we can appropriately apply a diagnostic process to figuring out what's wrong with the car. So, and short-term subscriptions to manufacturers are typically between $20 and $40, and you get somewhere between 2 days to a week. Some European manufacturers are more expensive, but you're realistically going to spend less than a $100 bill on getting factory service information for a period of time. So it's very affordable. So that's what I think we're seeing in that report when we're talking about 58% of shop management investments being repair information, is they're noticing that more and more advanced vehicles are not able to get that knowledge from an aftermarket source, or they're having to add another aftermarket source to the one they've been relying on.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Okay, so I think we're going to go on to the next question here. The survey found that quality was the #1 consideration when purchasing tools and equipment, above price and availability. So I know some of us were a little bit surprised by that, especially with, how things are nowadays. You might think that price is the #1 thing, but no, quality came out #1. So Brian, can you share with us your thoughts on that, and really why does quality resonate with, techs and shop owners?
It's funny. I've been in the tool and equipment industry since, well, before you were born. I always found it interesting that when we look at surveys like this, and I'll go back 10, 15 years ago, I made the same expectations that we'd be seeing price as the driving denominator there. And we'd get the survey and we look back through it, and lo and behold, it'd be quality. So I was really pleased to see that quality is remaining a driver. We're a professional industry, and we need professional tools and equipment, especially to do the things we have to do today. So I was really pleased to see that, what was it, 86% or something?
Yeah, it was really high.
The ones we're focused on the quality of the product that they're investing in. So, that's how they keep their machines running, keep their businesses going. And you're making that big investment because you don't want downtime. When you need it, and it's got to be dependable.
Yeah, that's such a good point too. And even stuff like maybe not massive investments, just even, some kind of lower level, cheaper hand tools. I would rather spend a little bit more money and have it last, than like be cycling through it all the time. Like, that's just annoying. And then you end up having downtime and you don't have a proper working tool. So yeah, I think that quality, that it's nice to see that it's top, and it does make sense, when you think it through.
Right.
I think all shop owners feel the same way. To be honest, Keith can disagree, but I doubt he will. Buying better quality tools or equipment at a higher price tag for like the longevity outweighs purchasing low quality tools or equipment multiple times. Which in theory, my mom used to say all the time, you try to go cheap, you might have to buy it 3 or 4 times. At that time, you already double paid what a good quality tool would have cost. Right, especially for shops that stock specialty tools or shop tools, you got to go with the good quality stuff and do your research. I think it all has to go back to do your research on the tool, due to your demographic and your shop needs.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Keith, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I don't think it's really changed. I think the vast majority of individuals that would say that price was the driving factor probably were thinking about that when they were asked, and not when they make an actual decision. When they look at the two and they're presented with the two options, they almost always will choose the quality over. In a previous career of mine, sold auto parts, and every bit of study that was done, when you go talk to a shop when you're going and making those calls or going out to the shop and ask them how everything's going, and price may always seem to pop up, but when they're polled what really matters, it's almost always quality. I don't want to come back. I don't want to have egg on my face for the customer. And I think that's kind of in our industry, we've noticed that quality really is the most important factor when it comes to those few variables of differences. So right. I absolutely agree with that. I don't have any difference of opinion on that. Quality is always one of my #1 driving reasons for doing something like that, or for purchasing a piece of equipment or tools or software or service information or shop management or whatever. quality is the most important part for me.
And I feel that consumers are looking for quality too, not what's more cost effective. I'll use cost effective instead of cheap. I don't like the word cheap.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
I used to tell Bernard, which is like our co-owner, and I used to tell him I used to hate when we started the company and I would hear reviews. Come here, they're cheap. Hate that word, you know. And the goal is to provide quality to these luxury brands for us. And essentially, we're more expensive than the dealer in maintenance just because my labor is more expensive, but people want to come because of the quality for the people you have working on their cars, right? And everything's more expensive. So, and honestly, I don't have a big issue with people asking about like parts markups or labor. Why is your labor more than the dealership? Well, I also provide that type of quality, right? Our warranty is better than the dealer. I offer 3 years, 36. Find a dealer that could offer that when they do a repair. You know what I mean? So a lot of that, it's not just tools. I think even consumers are seeking quality. And that I think has changed more in our industry now for consumers than actual shops buying quality tools. I think it's always been like that. And like Keith said, I don't know how those numbers came about, but I feel when they show me a cheap thing and then they show me quality, and yeah, this is cheaper. And I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty expensive. But then I'm looking, well, what's the quality? Because quality comes with the warranty and it comes with reputation, right?
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
like that. I spent a number of years in the mobile distribution channel, and they you'd go in and you'd have you'd be showing them the tool that they were looking for, and they're going, oh gosh, it's too expensive, it's too expensive, it's all priced, and they'd buy it, and then they go into the shop, and one of the friends would be walking by, like, dude, let me show you what I got.
Right.
And go show it off because now I got something.
Yeah, it's so true.
I mean, it's like buying hardware freight. I don't know if people know hardware freight. It's huge in California.
Yeah.
And then buying Snap-on, right? You're gonna buy this wrench at Hardware Freight. It's gonna break. You're probably gonna just once that you use it, it's probably gonna break. There is no warranty. You purchase the Snap-on, it comes with warranty, and it has the reputation. So again, you have to invest in quality.
Right. Yeah. And what about, the other question on that one, they talked about availability as well a little bit in the survey. And, so obviously I'm the editor of PTEN, but I have another magazine called Professional Distributor, which is the mobile guys, the Snap-on guys, the Matco guys and gals who are driving around selling these tools. And, they've done extremely well during COVID, and they kind of just bought up a bunch of inventory, and they're right there when the techs need them. And a lot of like those guys said, I had it, right? Like it's on the truck, it's right there, it was available. So I'm just kind of wondering if you guys notice anything around the availability of certain tools or equipment that you maybe needed, and does that play a role?
Yeah, it plays a huge role. Right now, our issue is OE equipment. So we have on order about 3 or 4 OEM interface tools for factory software that we need additionals of. Some of them we've had on order coming up on a year. I believe August of last year was one of our, there's a couple, and it's all due to like chip shortage and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
But a big part of that for us was what is available, and that's why we've seen the growth of Amazon, right? Because you can get almost anything; it is almost all available because they can source from anywhere, and you can get it relatively quickly. If I need a tool or something, and I call my 2 or 3 tool truck guys, and I don't have any gals that are tool truck people yet.
Yeah.
But if I call up my 2 or 3 tool truck guys that I currently have and ask them, and they can't get it for a week, but somebody else, Amazon can have it in 2 days, then I don't care if the price is more expensive or what the name on the box is or the warranty. So there is a need there sometimes when the decision to purchase a tool that is less expensive or less quality may be driven solely on the need for the equipment, right? And almost always that backfires at some point when it comes to sacrificing quality for availability. So for us, availability is obviously a number 2, but sometimes there is no replacement. Sometimes you know when not to purchase something regardless of the availability, to just wait out.
Yeah.
So that's we are seeing the effects of that, of chip shortages and equipment shortages and supply shortage and people shortages to create these. And then we're also seeing the effects of that on quality control, because it's one of the first things to go with manufacturing is quality control. It doesn't affect how much you put out, it just affects how much comes back. Right? So that's a major issue we have seen.
Yeah, I've never really thought of it that way. Good. Yeah, good point. Okay, so the next question, I know we talked about training already, but there was a section in the survey that asked kind of what's the most needed training. And the top one was hybrid and electric vehicle training. 53% of respondents chose that one. So I'd be interested to start actually just kind of from a tool and equipment lens. If you guys can sort of chime in on what tools and equipment are needed for shops who want to do more or want to even just get into, servicing hybrids and electric. So let's start there. Michelle, did you maybe want to start that one?
Sure. We've had discussions with our leadership team on this stuff. The more we see electric vehicles. For us, I think it would probably start with investing in buying equipment and lifts for e-machines and batteries. And probably investing in high voltage insulated tools for these guys. I think that's going to be a huge one for us. And then tech training, de-energizing like high voltage systems, I think is going to be a huge training factor for technicians the more and more we lean towards electric vehicles.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Brian, are you seeing more tools and equipment, being made specifically for hybrid or really like EV, like just the battery stuff and the safety considerations? Like, is that kind of coming more and more or not quite yet?
Yes, we have a number of our members that are working closely with some of the EV automakers because and it's to deal with everything like you were saying, lifts and a way to get a 2,800-pound battery out of the vehicle to what do you do with it before you take it out and after you got it out, how to handle all of that, what's needed in that respect. And to your point, it's everything. It's not just the tool, it's the education behind it. You need to understand that. And that goes upstream. I mean, especially if you're dealing in collision again, if the vehicle's in an accident and sitting there on the middle of the road after the accident, hopefully everybody's okay, but who approaches, who takes care of discharge and what have you, and how are you going to, what kind of a tow vehicle do you need to put that on and what have you, as well as all the tools to handle the jobs that need to be done once you get it back to the shop. So I think those are big educational opportunities for technicians, and especially the ones that are working in that space. So
yeah, Keith, what do you think on that one, on the hybrid and EV side?
So we adopted anything that was pushed off of other shops pretty quickly because we deal in the 10% of what shops don't want to touch, can't touch, or under tooled or under trained for. So we've dealt with hybrid and EVs for a while. We regularly work on some Teslas. We have a charging station at our shop, so when vehicles are in for repair, they do get charged.
Nice.
For EVs, we have worked on hybrids for years. For us, there wasn't much of a difference in investment for equipment. Some high voltage gloves and getting them recertified, having a few pieces of other safety equipment, making a process for when someone's working on a vehicle, setting out cones, making sure that only the individual that's working on the vehicle operates the vehicle. And that's kind of some generic safety standards that are used in some other larger corporations already for every car, right? Ensuring that only the individual working on the car is the one working on it was a big one.
Right.
Taking things like, every bit of it came down to education. Do you understand the system and what needs to go into it? Hybrid electric vehicles, I think, are significantly more complicated than an EV. An EV is simply the electric part of a hybrid electric vehicle and taking out the internal combustion engine. And we've dealt with multi-voltage systems for forever as technicians. There's always been a 12 volt and a 5 volt, and sometimes a 12 volt, a 5 volt, a biased 12 volt system. And if we kind of remove the scariness of the nuts and bolts and the brand and the label that's put on it to it as a hybrid, it's really just another vehicle. And we need to treat it like any other situation. We need to go and read service information, understand the system, how it operates, and the safety precautions. And that's with everything, whether you're changing a battery or a bulb or a hybrid battery. You know, it doesn't, for us, it hasn't really been a huge transition. We've just naturally dealt with those. And I think it's because we've approached it that way, is every car has a process. Let's just read and understand how it operates. This one just happens to have one thing we haven't seen before, maybe.
Right.
So it wasn't a massive investment, but lots of companies have been integrating this into their systems and advertising that this is a big part of what they do. And that's great. We need to, as technicians, understand that they are just vehicles, and we still have to repair them. And there's opportunities there for everyone. I mean, brakes are huge on Teslas for us, because typically a Tesla operator uses a 1-foot driving style, so they're not using the brakes as often. They're relying on regenerative braking and that setting within the system. They can turn that on and off, right? So they're not using their brakes as much, so they rust up and they need replacement, and you can't really turn the rotors very often. Typically they're under spec. We don't even turn rotors anymore. We just replace them. So we see massive opportunity there in every vehicle make. So
nice. Yeah, great. That's really good. And I will just add, we have some amazing technical editors on staff, and they're always reminding us to really make sure to remind the readers to get your training from a reputable source, right? So just do your research, get it from someone you trust, especially with some of this high voltage stuff that can be quite dangerous. So just look into that before choosing your trainers.
Yes.
So then my last question here, and what do we have? Oh, 3 minutes. Okay, I think we can do it. So this is something that sort of stood out to us a little bit. And Michelle, I'll start with you on this one. So it was only 25% of survey respondents said they had an R1234YF machine in the shop. I thought that was a little bit surprising because there was the legislative changes, but I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that. So Michelle, can you kick that one off for us?
We don't have one, but it's in the forecast of getting one by the end of the year. Probably due to the high price tag was kind of something we considered. And if we're really seeing the return of investment on how popular it is of a service. I know, again, some of my body shop friends that own collision centers, their return on investment is quick because they're using it on a day-to-day basis. For us, it's probably, I think I've seen 2-3 times a year, and I don't normally drive it next door to my body shop people. They let us use the machine, and that's how we do it, right? So again, it's education, looking at demographics to realize if the shop needs that type of investment now. For us, it's a forecast, like it's going to happen. It's not really smart for us to spend all that money now because I don't see it as often, but the more and more you see it, the first thing I did was do my research, get educated. My neighbor had a conversation. Yo, dude, when I need it, can we come around? I don't know, bill me, whatever. Normally it's like your friends and they borrow tools and blah, 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 back and forth. So they're like, yeah, whatever. And not abuse that power, right? Once you start seeing you need it, then invest in it. And education, I think it all comes down, it's a repetitive information. Sorry for the listeners, you guys keep hearing us say over and over the same conversation, the same terminology, but it all comes down to education, knowing your demographic and your shop needs, and then investing in this. For us, it's not ideal. It wasn't ideal last year currently, but we do have to forecast for it. I'm actually would like to hear from Keith and seeing if he's seen a lot of it at his shop or.
Yeah, we don't see as much come into the shop. We have had for almost 2 years now, 1234YF capable equipment. But again, we're driving shop to shop, whatever gets sublet out. Originally the business plan was if it was sublet out of a shop, we're going to do it, whether it be keys or refrigerant, everything but windshields, because I have a great relationship with a couple glass installers, and that was something I wasn't interested in getting into. Kind of my reasoning for not getting into that's the same reason I don't get into body work. There's too much politicalness in setting the pricing from other places. Yeah, I'll leave that at that. So
yeah, we don't do windshields either. We sublet that stuff out too. So I agree with Keith.
Yeah, but we decided not to get into those for that reason. But refrigerant was a massive opportunity. I want to say by the time we decided to invest, we had already lost enough money. We could have bought 2 machines. So we jumped right on board immediately. We were profitable probably within the second month, past paying for the equipment and everything. But again, we're visiting collision centers and repair shops daily, somewhere between 15 and 25 stops a day between our technicians. So it's very, very often daily that we're using a 1234YF refrigerant machine to either evacuate a system or refill one post repair or post collision.
Right.
So it was a huge opportunity for us. But again, if you're not seeing the mix come into your shop, there's not really much there for return on investment. So something to look at for that, if you are turning away handfuls of them a year, and you are looking at updating your machine, look at some combination machine that does both 134A and 1234YF, and then you have the availability there. It's not much difference in cost in getting a dual machine.
Yeah, that's actually a great advice because we've looked at stuff like that. So I think, yeah, it's a great advice that Keith just said. Never want to buy stuff just in the thoughts, which I think a lot of shop owners do that. They just buy stuff because they think they need it without really doing the research and really looking at their car count. And Keith is more in a special situation because he goes to collision centers and he goes to all this stuff. So he needs to have the stuff that other people don't, right?
Well,
for me, what I did is
I do that 10%. So,
Yeah.
So what I say I need is not what you typically need.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like for us, it was easier to sublet this stuff out, basically take it next door, let's do it, and keep forecasting, keep looking at numbers and looking at your car count and saying, when do you think we're going to need to purchase it and have it? And then do your research, because you might not need to buy that one. You could do a dual one. And there's not much of a price difference. If you need to already update your current one, you know, why not buy a dual one that's better?
Right.
Than
Sure.
having to, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think, that was great advice, and there was lots of really good advice here, and we're a couple minutes over. So I think we'll wrap that up. Michelle, Keith, and Brian, thank you so much for taking your time today to discuss the results of the aftermarket profile with us. I think it was
for the
a great
opportunity.
conversation.
Thank you so much for having us. Nice to meet
thank
you,
you.
Keith,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Nice to meet you both as well.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next year with new results from that aftermarket profile.
Great.
Have a great day.
You
Okay,
too.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.